Six is just $19.95. To order, call this toll-free number now.
This is CNN.
The Clinton plan points us in the right direction, down the right road.
Praise for Bill Clinton's new economic blueprint. Jesse Jackson says it deserves serious analysis.
It is said that knowledge is power. How far will Ross Perot go to acquire information that might give him clout? It's all part of Inside Politics 92.
This is Inside Politics 92 with Bernard Shaw in Washington and Catherine Crier at the CNN Center in Atlanta.
Inside Politics begins with an update from the campaign trail, and here's Patrick Greenwald.
Catherine, thank you. George Bush reportedly is making his strongest call yet for another cut in interest rates. The New York Times quotes Bush as saying, "I can understand people worrying about inflation, but I don't think that's the big problem now." In his words, "I don't think the argument that lowering the rates will shoot the long-term inflation rates up is valid anymore. And so, yes, I'd like to see it come down." It is unclear whether the president's remarks will be heeded by the Federal Reserve, which has indicated recently that no further cuts are necessary. Bill Clinton is searching for money to fund his campaign and issues to attract the voters. On one of those fronts, the Democratic presidential candidate is receiving some help. His economic plan got some unexpected praises today. CNN's Dan Blackburn reports.
Bill Clinton brought his message of economic reform to Washington, only to get some good news from halfway across the country. At the U.S. Conference of Mayors in Houston, the Reverend Jesse Jackson, who has been sharply critical of Clinton lately, praised the economic proposals.
It shows an authentic concern for the urban crisis and the need to reinvent. The Clinton plan points us in the right direction, down the right road.
Clinton was quick to respond.
I'm encouraged by those supportive remarks, and I think it's consistent with what I said to them at the Rainbow Coalition last week.
Earlier, Clinton devoted nearly 2 hours of nationwide television time to discussing his economic proposals. He explained his decision to slash his proposed middle-class tax cut in half by citing concern over the deficit.
The world is changing. The deficit got bigger. The American people cannot have everything they want.
Clinton said his program would be on the desks of Congress the day after he is inaugurated, and predicted an explosive first 100 days with congressional approval of his economic proposals.
I'm laying them out here in great detail, just as I have been since I began, so that the voters voting for me will be sending a signal to Congress, this is what we want done.
And on Capitol Hill, the Senate's majority leader sounded a welcoming note.
Individual members of Congress might not agree with point number 11, another one might not agree with number 23, another one with point number 77. But by and large, I think it's a positive step, and I commend Governor Clinton for it.
There has been talk of a summit meeting between Democratic congressional leaders and Clinton, but neither side has pushed very hard for it.
Clinton is keenly aware that he will need congressional support if he is to deliver on his 100 days promise if elected. But before then, he needs to maintain his stance as an outsider. So between now and November, he must perform the delicate balancing act of being neither too close nor too far from Capitol Hill. Dan Blackburn, CNN, with the Clinton campaign in Washington.
The latest financial campaign reports show that the presidential contenders are in different shape fiscally. President Bush has more than $8 million in the bank, but Bill Clinton is nearly $4 million in the red. Clinton's campaign missed payrolls and owes money to its staff. It also owes hundreds of thousands of dollars in unpaid bills and needed to borrow almost $2 million. Ross Perot is about even. When it comes to spending during the month of May, the Bush campaign paid out nearly $3 million, and Clinton spent more than $5 million. Much of Clinton's money went toward the California primary. Perot spent $2.5 million. It went mostly for his petition drive and organizational expenses. On the income side, Bush raised a little more than $2 million in private contributions. Clinton brought in $2.4 million. The Perot organization took in $2.7 million, including $2 million from Perot himself. President Bush's oldest son is doing his part to help his dad get reelected. George W. Bush is a director and consultant at Harkin Energy Corporation in Dallas, but he said today he's taking a leave of absence to help the campaign. Bush says the leave is necessary to avoid any appearance of a conflict of interest. He says he will act as an advisor. That was the same role, by the way, he played in the 1988 campaign. Vice President Dan Quayle continued a Western campaign swing today with a stop in Los Angeles. He's hoping to demonstrate the administration's commitment to urban issues. CNN's Ann McDermott was with the Vice President.
Vice President Dan Quayle said that while Ross Perot continues to be the administration's main competition in November, he doubts it'll stay that way.
The more that the people focus on Ross Perot, the more they're going to question his temperament, question what kind of a president that he would be.
The Vice President spoke at a Los Angeles housing project which was awarded a federal grant so residents could buy their apartments, part of a community involvement strategy to improve the lot of the poor favored by the administration. Inside, Quayle visited with a family of 9 and praised the mother's work counseling teenage girls. Outside the housing project, Quayle talked with other residents, angry residents. They claimed Quayle, as an outsider, knew nothing of their problems.
Don't you think I'm going to learn a lot by being here on the spot?
Not if you don't live here, you ain't going to learn nothing.
This is the first day we done seen you.
You ain't going to live if you don't live here, you ain't going to learn
This is the first day I've ever seen you physically.
Later, though, Quayle acknowledged his outsider status as he spoke to a group of community leaders.
Do you think that someone that lives in Washington, D.C. knows best about what's good for Los Angeles? The people here know what's good.
And later, Quayle met with children from a nearby elementary school and received his warmest welcome of the morning. Quayle then headed off for meetings in Sacramento and Las Vegas before heading back home to Washington. Ann McDermott, CNN, Los Angeles.
Ross Perot's criticism of the free trade agreement with Mexico has been blamed for sending that country's stock exchange into free fall. Today, a supporter of the pact, Republican Congressman Jim Colby of Arizona, said that Perot has sent his son to Mexico twice during the past 2 weeks to try to calm investors' nerves. No comment from the Perot camp. The Perot campaign is denying a report that he investigated George Bush's family for years. Perot's campaign chairman calls the Washington Post story flat wrong. But many Perot watchers still contend the Texas billionaire has a penchant for probes, as CNN's Tony Clark reports.
Undeclared presidential candidate Ross Perot says he never starts anything to end up in second place. But now, his methods are being questioned.
He's the sort of person who says the end justifies the means.
He's checked on George Bush, sending aides to talk with a prison inmate who claimed Bush was part of a scheme by the Reagan-Bush campaign to delay the release of American hostages in Iran to improve their chances of winning the 1980 election. Bush has flatly denied any such involvement. In 1986, Perot told Bush of an unsolicited call from a Florida investigator indicating 2 of Bush's sons were seen with unsavory characters.
As I understand, the conversation is very simple. I want you to know one father to another what I've heard on the street.
His motives may not have been as altruistic when in 1987 he asked his personal attorney, Tom Luce, to check on the business dealings of Pennzoil, a company headed by a former Bush oil partner. And later he asked Luce to gather public documents on 2 Bush investments in the late 70s. The information was turned over to the Washington Post.
In that transaction was a very questionable tax transaction that looked on the surface to be very, very questionable. Ross asked me to gather together the public records on that affair and give them to Bob Woodward.
The newspaper did not find anything significant in the material, and no stories were written. As a member of Reagan's Foreign Intelligence Advisory Board, Perot sought out information about rumored illegal U.S. government activities in Central America.
He would really try to find out who the source was, how true it was, and how credible they were.
Other Perot investigations have been closer to home, including widely reported checks on the personal lives of his company's employees.
I have said publicly on a number of occasions with my associates, if your wife can't trust you, how can I?
But Fort Worth publisher Richard Connor says Perot wasn't just interested in his own employees, but the newspapers as well. He recalls a 1989 conversation in which Perot claimed there was a compromising situation at the paper between a staff member and a high-ranking city official.
I said it wasn't true. I think it had the effect of telling me he was wrong. And he fired back something to the effect, I'd like to see pictures what would you say if I told you I had photographs?
Perot hasn't been the only one taking pictures. This 1990 home video was taken by Wayne Hayes, who was renting a mansion from Perot. Perot sued Hayes, saying he hadn't paid his rent, and cited what were called unsavory actions. Perot got a court order to have a policeman placed outside the house 24 hours a day and have the house searched 3 times a day. Hayes' wife believes Perot has used his influence to keep after them.
Ross Perot lived true to his words. He has ruined my husband. Within a year, an SEC suit was filed. There was an indictment. I mean, we've had FBI agents tell us, don't come to Dallas to live or do business. I mean, the man's a maniac.
No one has suggested that in any of these instances, Perot has done anything illegal. Perot's critics say these activities depict a prying, vindictive man who misuses power, while his supporters counter he's simply a man of high principles who fights for what he believes in. Tony Clark, CNN, Dallas.
I want to update you on a story and clarify a story we did a couple of minutes ago about Ross Perot and the Mexican Free Trade Agreement. As we said, Republican Congressman Jim Colby of Arizona said that Perot had sent his son to Mexico twice during the past couple of weeks to try and calm investors' fears there. Well, a spokesperson for Perot says that is just flatly not true, and also a spokesperson for the Mexican Stock Exchange says that Perot's son has not been there. Ross Perot has struck back and reports that he investigated President Bush and his family. In an interview in the Wednesday Washington Post, Perot calls the reports a fantasy, carefully crafted by the Republicans to destroy his credibility. Perot says the allegations are ironic because he says the Republicans have sent great amounts to investigate him, gone to great amounts. Perot, by the way, will have a chance to answer some of those allegations tomorrow when he holds his first scheduled formal news conference at 2 p.m. Eastern. CNN does plan live coverage from Annapolis, Maryland. I'm Patrick Greenlaw. Now let's go back to Catherine Crier for more on Ross Perot and the search for MIAs.
After several days of back and forth, Perot has struck a deal with the Senate committee to tell it what he knows about Americans still missing in Southeast Asia. Our military affairs correspondent Wolf Blitzer is tracking the story from the Pentagon. Wolf?
Catherine, Ross Perot and the Senate Select Committee on POW-MIA affairs have agreed that he will answer questions on the fate of missing American servicemen during a sworn deposition in Dallas next week. Both the committee and Perot's spokesman, Jim Squires, say that Perot will answer questions orally and the questions will not be submitted in writing in advance. Last week, Perot said he did not want to appear in person before the full Senate committee in Washington, arguing that that would turn into a political circus. The Pentagon, meanwhile, says it does not want to openly debate Perot on the way it's investigated missing Americans over the years. Perot and other critics have often accused the Pentagon and other elements of the government of neglecting the issue. Spokesman Pete Williams says that's simply not the case.
I think the idea that people in uniform don't care or haven't done enough to follow up reports that their colleagues, their shipmates, their fellow soldiers, their fellow airmen or Marines could possibly be held prisoner is a ridiculous allegation. No one could care more about them, with the exception, obvious exception, of the families. But people in uniform care very deeply about that.
Perot was not always the target of Pentagon criticism. In fact, less than a year ago, as you can see on the left of your screen, he served as the honorary chairman of the commissioning of the Navy's new billion-dollar Arleigh Burr-class destroyer in Norfolk. And earlier in the 1980s, before his open split with the Reagan-Bush administration, he was an insider's insider in Washington, serving on the president's so-called Foreign Intelligence Advisory Board. As a result, he was often privy to top-secret classified information on POW-MIA matters and other issues. Meanwhile, the co-chairman of the Senate committee wants the administration to declassify all remaining documents on missing Americans.
This issue could be wrapped up, I believe, in 6 months if the executive branch of the government, every single agency, NSA, DIA, NSC, DOD, CIA, whoever I've left out, I don't know, would roll up their sleeves and sit down and work with this committee, and they have provided documents. I'm not saying that they've been totally uncooperative. I'm just saying they haven't been totally cooperative.
Meanwhile, Perot's influence over the committee continues to hover over all of these deliberations. Some of the committee staffers are known to be close to Perot and indeed believe that only Perot, not George Bush, has the guts and determination to get to the bottom of this issue. Wolf Blitzer, CNN, reporting from the Pentagon.
They've got the numerical advantage. Will this be the year they really show their know-how and nerve? Coming up next on Inside Politics 92, we'll examine women's evolving role in America's electorate. Is there a gender-driven agenda this campaign year?
Inside Politics 92 is brought to you by Chrysler Corporation and its divisions, proud sponsor of the 1992 U.S. Olympic team.
We just put 70,000 miles on a Plymouth Acclaim, the lowest priced six-passenger car in America. Then we asked 100 drivers to compare the Acclaim with this new Honda Accord for comfort, performance, and overall superiority. 59 out of 100 preferred the Acclaim overall. We were blown away by the results, and so was the Accord.
Now get $1,000 cash back on Plymouth Acclaim.
Whitening toothpaste. Over 40,000 dentists recommend it for clinically proven safe whitening. If you think you have only two choices for business computer systems, think again. Hewlett-Packard.
Back in 1776, Abigail Adams admonished her husband to remember the ladies when it came to the framing of the Constitution. She warned women would foment a rebellion if not given particular care and attention. Some suggest a gender-guided rebellion may come to pass this year in the political arena. CNN's Brian Jenkins examines the changing role of women in America's electorate.
Only 72 years have passed since American women won their right to vote. Little girls who witnessed the triumph of the suffragettes are now grandmothers, and they live in a nation where today women voters outnumber the men. While voting rates for both sexes took a slide after 1964, since 1980, the percentage of women turning out for presidential contests has topped the rate for men. To hear women across the country talk, the issues foremost on their minds this election year are the same subjects men might list.
The state of the economy and, nuclear weapons.
Some sort of programs to address some of the inner city problems. Jobs and housing.
Taxes.
Waste in government.
Education.
But surveys show that women have traditionally approached politics from a more cautious perspective.
Women, for example, tend to be less confident about the country's economic future than do men. Women are a little more risk-averse than men. Women are less disposed toward the use of force, for example, sending troops abroad, than are men.
For many years, this conservative disposition led women to vote Republican more often than men. If women alone had voted in 1960, Richard Nixon would have won. It was men, not women, who gave the glamorous John Kennedy his victory. In 64 and 68, the women's vote went to the Democratic nominees. In 72 and 76, it went to the Republican incumbents. Then came Ronald Reagan. He won the women's vote in both 1980 and 84, but his presidency created what came to be called the gender gap. In 1988, George Bush won 56% of the men's vote, but only 50% of the women's vote. A big reason for the shift toward Democratic candidates among women may be their tendency to favor active, compassionate government. A recent CNN Gallup poll found that 58% of women surveyed believe government should do more to solve social problems compared to 47% of men.
So what I do is that I come in and I help people talk about the problem.
Child advocate and political activist Vivian Brady has long pushed for a more caring government and will look for candidates this fall who share her desire for social change.
Are they going to give us a piece of the peace dividend? Are they going to be sensitive to the needs of women and the needs of people of color in this country? And those are the things that I think about.
This year, issues of special concern to women, abortion, and sexual harassment have taken center stage. For investment banker, now full-time mother, Mary Bailey Wheeler, abortion is her overriding concern.
I would say I've voted as an American up until this year. This year I will vote as a Republican woman who's pro-choice.
Her support of abortion rights has even spurred Bailey Wheeler to step back onto the political scene. Once a college intern for a U.S. senator, she went back to Washington last week to lobby Congress on an abortion bill. Political analysts say many women appear to have developed a new consciousness about their need to influence a political process long dominated by men.
Professor, do you swear to tell the whole truth?
Stirred by the grilling Anita Hill faced at the confirmation hearing for Clarence Thomas, more women have written more checks and delivered more votes for women candidates this year than ever before. Every woman candidate for the U.S. Senate this year has run better among women than men, and Carol Mosley Braun clearly owed her primary victory in Illinois to women.
I think for the first time since I've been looking at the numbers, we're seeing the emergence of women saying, we want power, we're going to take it, and we're going to help other women have it.
It may be too soon to predict how women will split their vote among the three men in the presidential race, but below the top of the ticket, women voters are clearly poised to boost the ranks of their own gender in the seats of political power. Brian Jenkins, CNN, New York.
If you'd take a star and put it next to a house, if you could, a star would be like 20 feet bigger than the house. When it's nighttime in our world, it's day in their world.
By providing 70% of all television designed for children, your local cable company is making sure there's more to kids' TV than Saturday morning.
If there's no gravity right now, you can jump all the way over those trees. All of them.
Wow. On CNN tomorrow, making voter registration easier. Why Republicans are steering clear of this new bill on Crier and Company. Then on NewsHour, she had government protection, so why did she die in jail? All tomorrow on CNN.
Oh, this athlete's foot. The itching, the burning.
And the odor. Phew.
Stop the itch and the odor with new Odor Eaters Athlete's Foot Cream.
Odor Eaters for athlete's foot?
Look. Odor Eaters Cream cures itching, burning athlete's foot, while it controls that awful odor. Yet it costs less than any of these.
No more athlete's foot.
And no more odor.
New Odor Eaters Athlete's Foot Cream. Powder and spray, too.
Most people think paint is paint. Is paint. But then again, most people aren't professional painters. There's only one paint this good, and there's only one place you can get it. The pros know. Ask Sherwin-Williams.
The music you love is part of your life. Now, there's an easy way to collect the world's most beautiful music. Announcing great composers from Time Life Music. Start with the greatest music of Mozart. More than 2 full hours of his very best works at the remarkable low price of only $9.99 for 2 compact discs or 2 double-length cassettes. Great Composers brings you the most memorable music of Bach, Beethoven, Tchaikovsky, Chopin, all the great masters in crisp, clear sound. Every volume features one great composer, yours to preview at no risk. Keep only the albums you want. There's no minimum to buy, and you may cancel anytime. So call now to enjoy Mozart for a 10-day free audition and discover music you'll enjoy for a lifetime. Here's how to order.
To order, call 1-800-825-3800. That's 1-800-825-3800. Or send just $9.99 for 2 cassettes or 2 compact discs, plus $3.50 shipping and handling to Mozart, P.O. Box 1880, Department 2, Alexandria, Virginia.
Tomorrow night on Larry King Live, the writer who revealed that not all princesses live happily ever after. Meet Andrew Morton on Princess Di. Tomorrow night, Larry King Live, 9 Eastern on CNN.
In this era of 800-number politics, voters now can dial up independent information about presidential, House, and Senate candidates. It's part of Project Vote Smart, sponsored by the Center for National Independence in Politics, a nonprofit, nonpartisan group. You can call 1-800-786-6885 for candidate stands on the issues, their voting records, and how they are rated by various interest groups. For written information, the number is 1-900-786-6885, and that call will cost you $3. That's all for this edition of Inside Politics 92. I'm Bernard Shaw in Washington.
I'm Catherine Crier in Atlanta. Thanks for watching.
What makes Iowa Realty's Home Show 92 such a